In the last video, we saw how Liaris left her house and went with Edward for a new, hopeful beginning. But that night, she had the dream again, the one where she was brutally murdered. In the dream, shadows grew darker each time she saw it. She remembered the knight who had killed her, how kindly he had treated her in the beginning. The queen in the dream had touched the knight's hand and made him more powerful and stronger using her ability. She believed that he would obey her commands and stand by her side. He had even promised that his life belonged to Her Majesty the Queen. Liaris recalled the dream clearly. She was certain that she had once been the queen of a certain kingdom. People had praised her, and she had fought for the development of her kingdom. She had tried to fulfill the hopes and expectations of her subjects, thinking only of moving forward for the good of her country and its people. However, along the way she had made many enemies. She had trusted her knight more than anyone else, but he had betrayed her and stabbed her from behind. No one had followed her down her path of determination, not even those she once trusted. The only thing that remained in people's hearts was fear of the queen. They never saw her love or her vision for the kingdom. Liaris did not want her life to end the same way it had in her past life. After the dream, she woke up with tears in her eyes. She said aloud that she wanted to live for herself. For a moment, she was confused about where she was. But then she remembered. She was in the royal castle. She had been speaking a little too loudly and remarked that His Highness Edward was a bold man. Suddenly, she wondered what had made her say something like that. She reflected that everything he did and said made it seem as if he was always one step ahead, as expected of a prince. Then she suddenly realized someone had responded to her. From beside her, Edward said that it was not a bad feeling to be praised by her. She turned to the side and saw Edward lying next to her. Startled, she quickly asked what he was doing in her bed. Her cheeks turned red. Edward smiled and told her not to worry. He had not done anything. In fact, it was her fault because he had called out to her several times. But she had not answered. She had been like a sleeping beauty whom he could not wake up. He told her that she was his precious fiancée, and he could not let anything happen to her. He leaned a little closer in a teasing manner and said that he had not expected her to get so flustered. He complimented her and said that her blushing face was truly adorable. After teasing her, he started walking toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and told her that since they were going to be a couple, she should show him her true colors, just as she was doing now. She should not worry or remain tense when others were not around. His words comforted her deeply. He told her to come soon for breakfast and then left the room. Liaris reflected that she had never been allowed to act like that before. She had always been forced to suppress her feelings and wear a mask. But the prince had just told her that she could show her true self to him. At the breakfast table, Liaris was enjoying the meal to the fullest. She was amazed to taste such delicacies, and Edward gently smiled at the adorable sight of her enthusiasm. Edward reminded her that there were other princes in the castle, so she was free to roam as she pleased, but she was advised to do so with proper security. She should try to stay within the areas under his control and avoid unnecessary places. He showed her a flower and told her that she would recognize it. No one else was allowed inside that flower field. He explained that it was his favorite spot and that it offered the best view of the city. Now we see the same scene that appeared at the beginning of the manhwa. Edward standing on the balcony, telling Liaris that they had partnered for mutual benefit. It was not a typical relationship, but there was no reason for them to remain guarded all the time. They could lower their defenses in front of each other. Liaris remembered how he had been sleeping beside her that morning and how he had tried to get closer to make her feel comfortable around him. She did not think she would be able to adjust to this so quickly. The person she was now, and the person she had been in her dreams, had never been with anyone like that. But looking at Edward, she felt a little more confident in him. She began to think that maybe he could truly be the one for her. Edward turned to Liaris and told her that they would attend a party. She was confused at first, but he explained that the next day was his brother's birthday, the first Prince Elishir's birthday. Liaris recalled her first encounter with him and felt that he seemed somewhat troublesome. At a party like this, many people would be watching. She suggested to Edward that, if possible, she would prefer not to attend. However, Edward told her that she would attend as his fiancée. The party would be open to all royals, even those with the lowest abilities within the royal family. His brother would be the main attraction, but naturally, everyone would also focus on Edward. He needed her help so that he would not fall behind in the race for the throne. Now that she was the fiancée of a royal, She needed to act with grace. Liaris understood. She remembered her dreams and how she had faced situations like this many times before. There was no need to be afraid. She had stood among royals in her past life and felt prepared enough to face anything now. That night at the royal event, Edward stepped out of the carriage first. Then we see Liaris. She was wearing a beautiful red dress. In her mind, she wondered if it suited her. Perhaps she should have chosen something plainer. But when she stepped out, everyone could see how stunning she looked in it. Edward even complimented her, saying the dress suited her very well, which made Liaris blush slightly. They both entered the hall, and several nobles surrounded Edward, greeting him respectfully. A nobleman asked whether the lady beside him was his fiancée. In response, Edward gently pulled Liaris closer and introduced her to everyone. Liaris introduced herself with courtesy, but as soon as they heard her name, the crowd grew quiet. Liaris had expected this reaction. Someone remarked that Edward had decided to get engaged after refusing so many proposals until now. Edward smiled gently and said that she was right for him, right for the future king. He added that he hoped everyone would witness her true abilities when they were revealed, and that they would be revealed very soon. Looking at Edward's expression, Liaris felt that he was planning something. At that moment, the first Prince Elisher entered and greeted everyone. For Liaris, it was greeting after greeting for a long period of time. With so many eyes on her, she began to feel a little tired. Suddenly, someone called out to Edward from behind, asking whether it was true that he had really gotten engaged. The man rudely told others to move aside. Edward, however, was not intimidated. Calmly, he said that it had been a while since they had met. This person was Prince Garrick, the fifth prince, Garrick Leviton. He loved power, titles, and his position. Rumors said that he took full advantage of his status as a prince and did as he pleased. Liaris was not sure how much of that was true. Suddenly, he called Liaris a failure. He said that even though her family was moderately talented in psychics, she had inherited nothing and was a disgrace to the country. Liaris did not reply. Garrick did not hold back his words. According to him, it was the gifted who held the country together. Liaris grew angry at his words but tried her best to control herself. In his view, a man like Edward deserved someone better. Someone capable, not someone who could do nothing. He believed himself to be exceptional because he possessed extraordinary abilities, which was why he looked down on others. Edward cut off his brother's words and declared that Liaris was a gifted woman, and that her abilities were on par with his own. Liaris did not understand why Edward was speaking about her abilities without her permission. On the other hand, Prince Garrick did not believe Edward's words and told him to stop joking. He laughed and mocked Liaris, stepping closer to intimidate her by staring directly into her face. He insulted her appearance and said that he would never make someone who looked like her his wife, because then he would become the laughingstock of the entire nation. Liaris had heard such hateful words many times before. Arguing would only worsen the situation, and she was used to enduring such treatment. However, looking at Prince Garrick's face filled her with fury. A feeling of irreversible frustration washed over her. She stepped forward and challenged the prince, asking if he would like to be her opponent. Garrick was confused. Liaris replied that since Prince Edward had chosen her, she wanted to prove that he had made the right decision. She also wanted to convey this to Prince Garrick by using her own powers. The two stood opposite each other, an intense dark aura surrounding them as they glared at one another. Everyone moved outside and gathered around to watch. Many nobles stood at a distance. Garrick continued to mock both Liaris and Edward, while Edward calmly remained behind, saying that he would simply watch. Garrick began using his power. He raised his hand, and a massive tornado of flames burst forth. Everyone was shocked. It was a serious attack. They quickly moved back as the flames surged directly toward Liaris. However, just as the fire reached her, it suddenly disappeared. Liaris had not even dodged. Garrick was stunned. How had the flames vanished? Liaris laughed and commented that it was a nice flame, perfect for lighting up a dark night. She was clearly playing with him, which only made him angrier. He unleashed an even bigger attack this time. People began running away, afraid of being burned or caught in the flames. Yet one person stood calmly in the middle, watching the fight with interest. Liaris noticed him and thought that perhaps he was another prince like the others. The flames Garrick hurled at Liaris kept diverting away from her on their own. He could not understand why none of his attacks were touching her. The mysterious observer watching from the side was amazed. Liaris's movements looked like a graceful dance on the battlefield. It was then revealed that Liaris was not directly countering the flames. She was manipulating the airflow around her, subtly shifting the course of the fire. She even explained this to Garrick, but he was too furious to listen. Garrick was known for destroying entire organizations he disliked. It was rumored that he had burned thieves alive and possessed a rare destructive ability. Despite all that power, Liaris remarked that he had no sense of style. She deliberately taunted him to make him angrier and lose control. It was clear that her plan was working flawlessly. Now growing tired of the fight, Liaris raised a single hand and surrounded herself with ice crystals. She froze all the flames around her and continued freezing Prince Garrick as well. He collapsed to the ground. Liaris walked toward him, looking almost maniacal, while Garrick, who had never felt such intimidation before, was genuinely frightened. He had never expected to feel this way, especially at the hands of someone like Liaris. As Garrick lay on the floor, Liaris advised him not to look down on people without powers, or else he would pay a painful price for it. Edward then stepped forward and complimented Liaris, which eased the tense atmosphere and made her smile. He announced to everyone that this was Liaris's true power, and that he was convinced she was the one meant to become the next king's wife. Liaris now realized that this had been his plan all along, to reveal her power and impress everyone, even if it meant using his own brother's arrogance as a stage. She thought to herself that he was a sly and cunning man. That night, the mysterious person who had been watching Liaris during the fight was with his maid. It was clear that the maid was comfortable around him. He turned to her and said that he had seen something very interesting today. He asked about Liaris. The maid provided him with information about Liaris, that she had once been labeled incompetent and powerless, and that she was now engaged to his brother, Prince Edward. Everyone had believed she was incapable, but in reality, she had been hiding her powers. He wondered why she had hidden them and was fascinated by her strength. He wanted that power for himself. His maid reminded him that Liaris was engaged to Prince Edward, but he replied that he did not care. It did not matter who she belonged to. If he wanted something, he would get it. He declared that he would show her. He would claim Liaris for himself. He was utterly captivated by her. The next day, every noble came to meet Liaris. They complimented her on her abilities and praised her powers. They invited her to their homes as an opportunity to get closer to the future king. They were all extremely polite to her, but this constant attention was becoming overwhelming. Liaris could barely remember the name of the last man she had met. She did not even understand whether there was any real meaning behind all these meetings. Suddenly, Edward appeared from behind her. It was obvious that Liaris was annoyed by the endless meetings. Edward calmed her down, explaining that it had been her bold decision to fight his brother. Because of her actions, everyone now wanted to meet her. Since that fight, many visitors had approached her, people who were concerned only about their own interests. 3 people had come the previous day. Today, 6 had arrived. Liaris asked Edward whether it would not be better for him to handle the meetings instead. If they were his supporters, would it not be more beneficial for them to speak directly to him rather than to her? Edward replied that he was busy with other matters. Annoyed, Liaris responded that he had come all this way just to tease her and then say he had no time. Edward then clarified that the visitors were not originally his supporters. They had been Prince Garrick's supporters, but after yesterday's fight, they had switched sides. That was simply how things worked. There was not even a thread of loyalty among nobles. They were not interested in the battle itself. They were interested in what was good for them. They would support the person who seemed closest to becoming king. Liaris then asked whether, in that case, they might eventually switch sides to Prince Elishir, the first prince, when the time came. Edward told her that she was correct. However, their support was still necessary. They could not win the battle for the throne without these nobles. They would make sure that those supporters did not leave them. In her mind, Liaris thought about how people who were attracted only to power would eventually betray anyone, no matter how much strength was shown to them. She had seen it all before. Even those she once believed to be loyal had betrayed her in her past life. After speaking with Edward, she still had to meet 2 more nobles. She forced a fake smile every time she greeted them. Edward needed the support for his future, so she decided to endure it. After finishing the meetings, she was about to leave when she suddenly heard someone entering. A man walked in without prior permission. Liaris did not know who he was at first. He quickly approached her and greeted her. He was the second prince, look at Levitin, one of the candidates to become the next king after His Highness Elishur. The second prince began a light conversation with Liaris. He had brought 2 of his maids with him. Liaris felt uneasy about the situation. She tried to end the conversation by saying that she would call Prince Edward. However, the second prince replied that it would not be necessary. She was the one he had come to see. He took her hand, stepped closer, and told her that he wanted her. Liaris was confused and shocked by his words. Liaris tried to act confused and told him that she did not understand what he meant. He told her that he had been drawn to her power. She had displayed such an amazing ability. This made Liaris frustrated. He was just like everyone else, a person attracted only to power. She apologized and reminded him that she was engaged to Prince Edward. Still, he did not back down. He stepped closer and said that he already knew that, but he wanted her anyway. Liaris replied that if that was the case, he would have to speak to Prince Edward about it. However, he ignored her words. He said that he only needed her and whatever she wanted, he could give her. He could give her everything. He was serious, straightforward, and arrogant. He moved closer, gently held her cheek, and told her to be his. One of his maids called out to him from behind, telling him that he was being too aggressive and that it was impolite to approach her like that. She said Liaris might be shocked. Surprisingly, he listened to his maid's words. Liaris was confused, as she had not expected him to heed a maid's advice. Before the situation could escalate further, Edward arrived. From the look on his face, he seemed furious. Without hesitation, the second prince said, "Edward, you're interrupting our conversation." Edward asked him what he wanted and what plans he was making. The second prince replied that he had not come to see Edward. He had come to see Liaris, and they were simply having a conversation. Liaris noticed that this man was incredibly confident. He was not even attempting to hide his intentions. Edward pulled Liaris closer and said that she was his fiancée, so he should stop being selfish. The second prince laughed and remarked that he had thought Edward was uninterested in women, but it seemed he had been wrong. Edward smiled slyly and pulled Liaris even closer, telling him that he had already lost her. This confused the second prince for a moment, but then he confidently replied that he could see Edward was lying. There was no love between them, only mutual interests. He added that there must be some reason why she had hidden her power all this time. Liaris now realized that this man was not just arrogant, he was perceptive. Even Edward, who was usually composed, seemed slightly unsettled in front of his brother. The second prince stated that he was not interested in their relationship. The only person he cared about was Liaris. The reason he was interested in her was simple, her power. He wanted that power. There was no other reason. He admitted openly that he was a greedy man. Humans were greedy, and it was greed that had driven the evolution of humanity and the development of nations. There was no future in a world without desire. Therefore, he intended to change this nation into one driven by true ambition. To do that, he needed power, someone as strong as Liaris. He believed that was the same reason Edward had brought her to his side. He then told Edward that he already had the power to rule the nation, so why didn't he take advantage of it? Even Liaris knew that was true. After all, Edward possessed one of the most powerful psychic abilities in the nation. Edward grew visibly angry. He told his brother that he did not like using power to force people to their knees. He was clearly frustrated and flustered, while his brother stood smiling calmly. Liaris realized that she had never seen Edward in such a state before. Look at Levitin intrigued Liaris slightly, but not in a good way. What was this proposing his brother's fiancée? And why did Liaris said Edward has the most powerful ability in the Empire? Now I am eager to know his ability. Let's see what he will do to take care of this look-at situation. To know what will happen, please support our channel. Thank you for watching.